So let's jump into PyCharm and start building this game. Remember, our convention is that we're going to start out with the main thing we run called program. So we'll add a new Python file called program.py. And our app, as the very first thing, had at the top a header. So remember, we'll do print. We had a bunch of dashes here. Now in PyCharm, if you want to duplicate a line or a selection or a set of lines, really, you can hit Command D in OS X, or in Windows or Linux, Control D. So I can hit Command D a few times. So it's a little bit of a shortcut. And then it said, guess that number game, something like that. Let's do some centering. And finally, let's do a print just to leave some space there at the end. Before we go any further, let's just run this really quick to make sure everything's working. Again, there's no run configuration up here because this is a new project. So we right click and say run, and then, all right, a little header. It is working fine. So now the next thing we need to do is come up with that random number and the number the computer guesses. So we'll create a variable called the number. And now somehow we need to here come up with this random number. One of the great things about Python is it comes with all of these modules and libraries that we can use. One of them is called a random library or random module. Now, PyCharm is not happy because we need to actually tell Python we intend to use a module that is not what's called a built-in. This is like an extra part of Python. So we need to explicitly state, I'd like to use this part of Python. This works identical to whether it's something in Python with a standard Python implementation or something external, like some other library you've gotten. So we're going to say import, and we just say random. And then we'll say random dot, and now we have a bunch of options. A little warning went away. The one we're interested in is randint. We'll come over here and call randint, and if we hover here for a moment or pause for a minute and say it takes two parameters, A and B. Now, so I would guess that those are numbers, and I'm sure you would as well, and that they somehow specify the lower and upper bound that we're supposed to work with here. But is this including those endpoints, somehow between these endpoints? And we can check the docs, but it turns out that this is actually includes both endpoints. So what we want is 0 to 100. Let me show you something that PyCharm can do for us that really is pretty amazing, and one of the things I really like. Imagine, let's roll this back for a minute. Imagine that we don't have this import going on, and we don't have this line. So here we are again, and we want to say, just like before, the number is equal to random. Now, PyCharm has a little red light bulb you can see there, and it says, hey, this is not right, but I'm pretty sure I can fix it for you automatically. So if I hit Alt-Enter, it'll come up with a list of options to fix it. So I could actually just hit Enter, and it'll say, we're going to import random. And there's a couple ways we could do it, but this top one is what we had done before. So I can just hit that. You can see right at the top, it added import random. Now I can type randint, and off we go. So a lot of times when you see an error like this, one of these red squigglies and this little light bulb in PyCharm, that means that there's some kind of auto fix it's going to propose for you, and it's probably worth checking out. Okay, excellent. So we have our number guessed, our number between 0 and 100 inclusive. Now the next thing to do is get some input from the user, and we're going to just tell the user, hey, enter a number between 0 and 100. So I'll call this guess, and this is going to come back as text. So I'll be very explicit and say guess text. So we'll say input, just like before, guess a number. So guess a number between 0 and 100, and we'll just let the cursor stop right there, and we'll wait for that. Conceptually, the next thing that we're going to do is we want to compare the number against the guess text. Now, Python is not very forgiving about equality between disparate types, if you will, numbers and strings. These don't really have anything to do with each other. So if we try to just say print out whether the number was, say, less than the guess text, if I try to run this, you'll see it'll actually crash. So if I put in 42, and it says you cannot sort between or compare the order of integers and strings together, right? You can't ask whether they're equal. They'll never be equal, but you could ask that question, but you cannot do the type of comparisons that we need for this test. So the next thing we need to do is actually take this guess text and convert it into an integer, and we'll call that integer the guess. So this is super easy. The int class is just built in, and we can call its initializer like this. We can pass it some text, and then what's going to come out is actually a guess. And we could say really quickly, print the guess text, and you can actually ask for the type of these. So let's print those two out, and here we'll print the guess and the type of the guess. So if we run these two, if I enter 42, I'm can see the first line where it was guess text is actually a string. str is the string class in Python. We've actually converted it successfully to 42. It looks the same when you print it out, but it's definitely not the same type in memory. All right, the next thing we need to do is write some conditional statements with if and else statements and some comparisons and so on in order to determine whether we've won the game, the guess was too high, too low, that sort of thing. This is one of our core concepts from this application, so let's go dig into that.